Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is God Talk. I'm Dan Smith, Pastor Dan. And we're doing a series here that I did for another church we now attend, and I'm a part of the La Sierra Spanish Church in Riverside. And they have an English service, and I'm one of the regular speakers there now. So when this virus hit and they were not able to have church in church anymore, they said, Pastor Dan, can you do a week of prayer? So I went and taped several of them, and they showed them every night. It was amazing. People have time. They were watching. But let me get a little bigger audience for some of these and preach a few of them here. I called it my Big God series. When the whole world is going crazy, and maybe we just need to remember how big God is. Today, yea, God, for being a refuge. I think I was probably single during this time, young pastor in California. And I went up to Sacramento to see a friend of mine, was a pastor there at the Carmichael Church. I got off the plane, I rented a car, and I'm driving from the airport down this exit. I don't know what I did wrong, but I did something wrong. Excuse me. And I made the guy mad. And he had a truck and had a girl in the car with him. That's all I remember. And he got in front of me, and then he slowed down. I had to back up, go slower and slower. Finally, we're hardly going on the freeway. I said, I'll pass him up. Then right behind me, tailgating. So I'm freaked out. What's going to happen with this guy? We came to my exit, long exit, maybe a quarter of a mile. And we got to the end. I did not know what I was going to find. Would I have a stop sign and I could go? Sure enough, long line of cars. I stopped. I look in my mirror, here's this guy in his truck, stops his truck, jumps out of the car, running up to me. I don't know what to do. I had a good car. I pulled over to the right, and I floored it, dirt flying. Got out of there. I didn't know what I was going to find when I got to the front. There was a line of cars and a stop sign. Would I have a culvert, or what would I have? When I got to the front, there was room for me to wiggle, and I turned. He quit running. I was faster than him. And I just got lost. I didn't care where I ended up. I just turned left, right, just got lost. Heart pounding. What was this guy going to do to me? I needed a refuge. Looking over my shoulder to see. I've been on that exit a few times since then. It comes all back to me. Guy running after me. Footsteps. In the Old Testament and in the Middle East, they had this concept of blood vengeance. If something happened to one of your family, your clan, your extended family, you had the right to designate a blood avenger. And that blood avenger had the right to go track down whoever was the murderer or whoever did it and kill them. So if you had a family, had something happen to you, you would choose the fastest runner in your family. Okay, you're the one. And it was up to them, as a matter of honor, to go find the murderer and kill them and bring the evidence back to your family that it was done. Then the whole family could have a party because they had been avenged. The problem was, what if it was an accident? If you're out working, like the Bible has a story, and the axe head flies off, and the axe head kills somebody. You didn't mean to. It wasn't your plan. And so that family could still have a blood avenger and come after you. So God set up these cities of refuge. You can read about them in Joshua 20:21 and Numbers 35, 9-11. And the Lord said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, designate cities of refuge for people to flee to if they have killed someone accidentally. Those cities will be places of protection from a dead person's relatives who want to avenge the death. The slayer must not be killed before God. So they had a map. 3 of these cities were on this side of the river, 3 of the cities were on that side of the river. Never more than a half-day journey running. So the trails were all to be well-marked. Refuge. Once a year, the whole city, the whole country would come out and maintain those trails, because you never know, it might be you that needed those. And so they all worked on those trails. So if you committed an unintentional murder somehow, there's an accident, you had to take off and start running and get to one of those cities. And if you could get to that city before the blood avenger got to you, you were safe. And you could stay in that city until the high priest died. When that high priest died, then you were free to go back to your house and you were safe. If you left that city, then you were fair game and the blood avenger could get you. So what does refuge feel like? You can imagine hearing the footsteps of the blood avenger after you, then all of a sudden you're inside and you're safe. I don't know why this comes to my mind, Indiana Jones. He's in one of the movies, he's going to go get one of those gods. I saw on television somewhere. And he grabs that little, whatever that was, and sticks it in his bag, and he begins to run, and boy, that made all the gods mad. And here's skeletons coming out, and spears, and all kinds of things. Big stone is rolling after you. There's a door that's closing, and he scoots under that door. He comes outside, and the Indians are after him, and they're shot their archery, and they're shooting arrows after him. And he's running for dear life and holding on to his little thing he had and his hat. And he yells at the airplane, start the engines. He dives into the water, swims over to the plane, climbs up in. They're shooting arrows at him. The plane takes off. And you have a refuge. Refuge. We were in Thailand, my first trip back to Thailand after 25 years since we grew up. And I took 40 kids back. We went up to northern Thailand to Chiang Mai, the school there, helped build an orphanage. I did wicked prayer at the school. And then they organized trekking. So I don't know really what that was. You go sleep up in these villages with the Thai tribes, native tribes. So we rode a boat, and then we had to walk 2.5 hours. They said mild hiking. It was not mild. Right up a mountain. And it began to rain. He cut little walking sticks for us. So here we are in the rain, trying to have a raincoat over you so you're really hot, slipping and sliding on this clay, and it's straight up a mountain, and you're tired. Even I was 25 years younger. And finally we got to these houses. You climb up this little narrow ladder, go into these houses on stilts looking out over the valley. Peel off your wet clothes, get dried off, put some dry clothes on, and we're sitting along the edge. We're 20 feet up. We're sitting over the edge, watching the rain just pour down. And we're in a refuge. Thank you. Refuge. One of my favorite memories of going to Hawaii, we try to go to Hawaii almost every year. We have a little cheap timeshare. We wanted to go for a hike. We keep bugging the boy, let's go for a hike. And Hilda and I went, we chose a nice short hike. It began to rain. Both boys said, we're out of here. Give us the car keys, Dad. And they headed back to the car. But Hilda and I said, let's get under an umbrella. We had umbrellas with us. I'll never forget being with Hilda under that umbrella up in the rainforest of Kauai in Hawaii, one of the rainiest places in the world. And here was a beautiful white egret or some bird on top of the forest canopy, and we're watching rain coming down. We're under a refuge. And the Bible says God is a refuge. When I was a young pastor, a youth pastor 45 years ago, a group of people took me canoeing in British Columbia. One of the great weeks of my life. We drove 700 miles. We got up there. There were some of my young people and their fathers. One guy had 2 sons. I'm in a canoe with him. And we canoed. We had to carry your canoe over the mountain, paddle in the canoe. Then it began to rain. It wasn't as much fun when it was raining, and you're soaking wet. Your backpack is wet. You come into a tent, and it's soaking wet. And one day we are cold and we're wet. And we got our canoes, came to a little place, and here was a shelter. And they had a fire going. It was full of people. But at least for an hour, we could get in there and get warm and get dried out and at least get a little break from the wind and the rain and the water everywhere. It's a refuge. I'll give you one more. I don't know why these pictures come to mind. I'm trying to get you to feel this refuge. This guy was a thief in this movie, but somehow he ended up in the police. He's one of the sheriffs. So he's an expert because he knows all the tricks of thieves. And so he's trying to pretend that he is a sheriff. Well, finally they're on to him. And now there's a chase all across the deserts of California. And in the middle of this chase, somehow he comes to the border between the U.S. and Mexico, down by San Diego somewhere. And somehow he gets across that line. They're running after him, and they stop. He's on this side of the line, and they're on that side of the line. And all of a sudden it becomes clear to him. He said, "You mean you can't come here? No, we don't have jurisdiction over you anymore." And his face lights up. And he turns around and he waves, "Bye." And he dances a jig down the road. He's safe. He's safe. They can't come after him anymore. It's a refuge. And the Bible says that God is a refuge, that these cities of refuge were God's idea. That somehow it's in the heart of God, it's in the nature of His very character to be a place of refuge. That if you come to Him, He will be a safe place for you. And for people who are running, and people who are hearing footsteps, and people who are in trouble, people who need a hiding place, God is a refuge. Do you need one of those places? You need God as a refuge today in the middle of this virus. You're scared, you've lost your job, you wonder if there's enough food or how to help your family, help your kids do school and still get your work done. You need a refuge. The Bible says God is a refuge. All these cities of refuge were to teach us about a bigger reality, that God is a refuge. Psalm 46:1, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Psalm 91 verse 4, under His wings you will find refuge. We think of God as being a male, our Father who is in heaven. But here, this is the more feminine side of God. Matthew 23:37, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I have longed to gather you, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. God is a refuge. In Babylon, they thought they were safe. They thought they had food for 20 years. They had walls that were 20 feet thick. They had the river Euphrates coming through. They thought they were absolutely safe. Cyrus digs a dry lake and they divert the river and they come inside. The gates are open. They come under the walls and they're not safe. Handwriting on the wall. I heard a story. A group of Christian people, including 2 Adventists, mother and a son, were going through the Pentagon. And somehow the young man began to think, if we're in the Pentagon, we're probably in the target for all the Russian missiles and the Chinese missiles and the Korean missiles and whatever else. And he thought, asked the guide, I said, are we safe here? It's like the whole world got their bombs trained on the Pentagon. And the colonel took offense at that. He turned around, full uniform, and he said, this is the safest place on earth. 2 months later, 9/11. Plane blew a big hole. Not safe. Only God, the ultimate refuge, safe. The question is it real? Can you really count on God to come down when you need Him and you're hearing footsteps, to come down out of space and come here and be here for you and give you a refuge? Solve our problems. Does He really come down when we're under stress and just fighting the battle and the people are all around us? And does God somehow come in and give you some sort of relief? Or is it all in our mind? I read a wonderful book years ago called Watership Down. These rabbits decided they were going to have to move because there was a construction. They were having a development in their place. So their Moses leader rabbit began to lead them to the promised land. And they traveled. They have all kinds of episodes. But whenever they're beginning to hear footsteps, these rabbits are scared. They'd be out feeding, and all of a sudden there would be this something. And they would go down quickly, and they had one part of their warren. They called it the Great Room. And all these little scared rabbits would go in there, and the storyteller would tell stories about how their God had saved them in the past. And the rabbits, when they heard the stories, would calm down, and they would feel safe again down in their warren. It's a refuge. You think about Tom Hanks in Castaway, the movie. I'm sure you've seen on television. He's all by himself. He's on a cave. He's on an island all by himself, and there's no one else around. And he gets an idea, and he takes a little volleyball. It's a Wilson volleyball, and he takes charcoal or blood somehow, and he makes a little face on that. And he calls it Wilson. Wilson becomes his friend. Talks to Wilson. Not so lonely. He has Wilson. He decides he's going to find a way to get off. He makes a raft. He takes Wilson on the raft, and he gets out there. And in a storm, he loses Wilson. Wilson was an emotional refuge, but it was not real. Is God a real refuge, or is it all in our head? Stephen Hawking said, all this belief about second coming in heaven is all just to help you sleep at night. It's a warm blanket, but it's not real. Is God a real refuge? And we say all the way through the Bible, Psalm 9, verse 9, the Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And we could line people up here who would say God has been a refuge to them. We come to God. Who needs a refuge? Who doesn't need one? When you hear footsteps, when somebody is after you, think of all the people that I have had to pray for, pastor, and nurture. Even in a week, lost their job, sick, breast cancer. Had one mother and daughter breast cancer the same week. Cancer. I heard about one of the teachers of La Sierra, preachers with us. He has cancer. You're in this virus today. We need God. How many people email me from overseas? Pastor Dan, can you help us with our church? Can you help me with my kids to go to school? They all need a refuge. People get criticized, and it's not fair. People lose their job, and it's not fair. Now we have massive unemployment. 30 million people, 30 plus, no job. Factories, stores closing. You need a refuge. Need a refuge. Someone criticizes you, and it's not fair. You don't feel like you deserve it. And God says in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Shelter, refuge. Thou preparest a place for me. Yeah. How do you access this? We don't have any cities of refuge to run to. Some people think, well, okay, we're in Loma Linda. Okay, that's God's place. I joke about it. I drove over from La Sierra to Loma Linda one time. I had to do something in the morning. I forget. Oh, someone was in the hospital. He just passed away a few days ago. Wonderful friend of mine, Pat McGuire, is in the hospital, and the only time I had to see him was Sabbath morning. So I drove over here early Sabbath morning, went up to see him. And right then we had a time here in Loma Linda where they had cameras. Every corner. And I was in a hurry, and I would glance down the road, big intersection, no cars coming, and I would go, and they got a picture of me. I got 3 tickets, $400 or $500 each in minutes. I needed a refuge. Loma Linda was not the refuge. What is the first step we have to do? We have to call upon God. Psalm 91, verse 15, He will call upon me and I will answer. I will be with him in trouble. You have to be willing to go from independence to dependence and say, I will trust you. We watched a show on midwife yesterday. We love this PBS show every Sunday night called A Midwife. England years ago. And this girl is blind and she now is having a baby, and they all tell her, you're going to have to get help. You cannot do this by yourself. They're going to take the baby to the social services. She wants to do it by herself. And by the end of the movie, it was clear she needed help, and the sister came to help. She finally said, okay, I need help. You have to cry out. I was rafting in Oregon. We were all whitewater rafting. I had my little kayak. We had a group of us in kayaks, but we had one big boat. But somehow I was going through one of those rapids, and I turned upside down. My boat was on ahead, and I'm going through this water, and you're drinking the water, and you're fighting, and you got a lot of gear. You got a life jacket, and I was waterlogged. And there came a time when the guy in the boat called. He said, Dan, you need some help? I did not want to get help. I wanted to do these 3 days all by myself, in the water, in the boat, with my own boat, under my own power. But as I got weaker and weaker, and I thought maybe I should use some help. I said, yeah, I think I need help. I grabbed a hold of the rope, and they hauled me into the raft, and I rested. I needed a refuge. You have to cry out and say, okay, I need help. I need help. I'm not going to make it on my own. How many times I've had to humble myself, go to my wife, go to my church elders, go to my father, go somewhere and say, I'm not going to make this on my own. Cry out for a refuge. Number 2, you're going to have to realize you can't stay where you are. They had to drop everything and start running. You can't stay where you are. I can't say, God, I need help, and then stay right where you are. You're going to have to move. Go to God. God says, okay, I want you to go here, do that. You have to go somewhere. You can't stay where you are. Number 2, you can't wait. You have to do it now. As soon as they got that blood avenger, and that's the fastest runner they have, they're going to come after you. You better get going. So you cannot wait. If you say to God, I need a refuge, you can't wait and say, okay, let me do it later. Let me go some other time. Let me go next week. Let me go when things are easier. Let me go when I have less stress. You have to go now. Go to God and do wherever He says. And number 3, once you get to the city of refuge, you can't keep on running. Some people keep on running. When you get to your God who is your refuge, you stop there. I don't need anyone else. I don't need another God. Stop here with the God you have. So number 1, you can't stay where you are. Number 2, you can't wait. Number 3, you can't keep running once you get to God. Next, you need to pour out your soul to God. Psalm 62 says, pour out your hearts to Him, for God is our refuge. You can't hide from Him anyway. May as well just pour it out. Say, God, I'm in trouble here. It's not working. People are against me. I've made some people mad. I've got a difficult relationship. I've lost some money here. I made some bad choices. God, I need refuge. Pour it out to God. Finally, you have to be able to do this by yourself. You have to be able to go to God. If you were one of those and you had to run, you had to get going, and you had to go. Yes, God can use people in your life, but there may be times you have to go find God of refuge. And you don't have to do that yourself. Wherever you are, John 4 says, God is a spirit, and people can worship Him in spirit. You don't have to come to a place. You don't have to come to my church. You have to come to LBN. You don't have to go to a particular pastor or a particular counselor or a particular place. You have to be able to go to God and cry out to Him, I need a refuge, and God will be a refuge. And He will pour resources into your soul and lift you. Have to be able to do it on your own. Harry Potter, if you've read any of the books, they had an invisible cloak. And sometimes they could just cover up. And the enemy could be walking by and they would not even know there's a rock there. Covered. God is our refuge. Willow Creek in Chicago had a wake-up call when they found out after all the years in that church, they thought if you just come to church, you would get what you needed. And they found out people hadn't made any progress from the time they started coming to church until today. And they realized they needed to help people be self-feeders. They thought the church could handle it all. Come to church, we'll teach you what you need. They needed to help people be self-feeders, to be able to find God and to be able to read the Bible and to pray and call out to God, and He would be a refuge. Do you know that? Can you find God on your own? Preached last week, 1 Samuel 30, verse 6, David strengthened himself in the Lord. Can you find God on your own? Well, we got to finish this. Bible says God was a sanctuary. Sanctuary was cleansed. God said, let me make a sanctuary where I can dwell among them. Sanctuary is a safe place. Jesus will take care of your sins. You can go to God. You can go right into the most holy place. Church should be a sanctuary. Sometimes the church is not the safest place, but church has to be the one place you can go to. There's no more footsteps. Should be safe emotionally. You will not be hurt in church. We make too many mistakes. Church should be a place you can go, and they will love you as you are. Be a refuge. Some guy told me, he said, I need a place for my weary soul. Wasn't Adventist, went away. Finally decided to come back. He said, Pastor Dan, will I be safe here? Hope so. And of course, someday, heaven. Heaven is going to be the ultimate refuge. We will go to a place where there will be no more footsteps, there will be no more criticism, we will be emotionally safe. There will be no more stress, no more battle. We will feel safe. Beyond the reach. The accuser of the brethren has been cast down. Be no more tears, no more. No more. You need a refuge today. Last week we said, yea, God, for being powerful. Today we say, yea, God, for being a refuge. That if you're hearing footsteps, if you're being crowded somewhere, run to God, who is a refuge. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. This is God talk.